Welcome back. This is the Too Tall Sports Podcast. My name is Brett Lauren. I'm the host. Thank you for joining me as always. Got some great content for you today. My guest is Justin Ramsey. He is the AA pitching coach in the Baltimore Orioles organization. So I have a great conversation with him. He's got some unbelievable stories. You'll definitely want to hear those on kind of how he came from nothing as a coach, from the junior college route to D1, D2, and then he eventually got a job in pro ball. So great episode with Justin Ramsey today. As always, you can find the show at Too Tall Sports Podcast on social media. You can find me on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Spotify for listening. You can go to Apple Podcasts, which I highly recommend you do, and also subscribe, rate, and review. Need all those good recommendations from everybody. So if you enjoy the show, let me know. You can also email me at the show if you want to get in contact with me at tootallsportspodcast@gmail.com. And hope you enjoy the episode today with Justin Ramsey. All right, welcome back to another edition of the Too Tall Sports Podcast. My next guest played his college ball at Sacramento City College and Oral Roberts University. He coached at Sac City, Long Beach State, and Nova Southeastern University, and is now the AA pitching coach in the Baltimore Orioles organization. He is Justin Ramsey. What's up, Justin? Glad to have you on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. How are we doing today?
Good, man. Glad to have you. Wanted to get all about your, hear about all your career achievements and everything, but and just for reference, Justin and I kind of connected through a mutual friend of ours, Randall, who was on the last episode 23, I believe. So pretty cool that, the baseball is a small circle. So
it's a beautiful small world, isn't it?
Yeah. And so before we get to your career and stuff, I just want to get to, you just got back from coaching at the alternate site in the minor leagues with the Orioles. So, before we get to your career, I just want to see what the pandemic experience has been like in baseball wise in the minors for you over the last 6 months.
Different. Obviously, I think that goes without saying. Very familiar with Zoom calls. That has become the norm for any interaction with the players. When we first broke from spring training, I think everyone thought it was just going to be a couple weeks, nothing crazy. And then obviously reality set in, and it was one of those we started just checking in with the guys and understanding it was going to be a lot of Zoom calls. And so going through that and, doing weekly calls with video sent to my phone and bringing it up in almost like a three-way Zoom and breaking down what they're doing. And then it was like that for about 2.5 months, I guess. And then they decided to obviously bring baseball back, do the spring training 2.0, the summer camp, if you will, and then get into the season. And so I was able to go back for part 2 of spring training up in Baltimore for about a week before the Bowie site opened up. And then that's when we shifted our focus down to there and had anywhere from 10 to 30 guys, depending on the time of the year and home and away and things like that. So very interesting. We got tested every other day. We had to wear masks on the field. We had totally social distance. We just played each other and basically simulated games because the bulk of the guys that were at the alternate site were pitchers. And so if you only have 9 position players, you can't really play a game. And so we made the most of it, tried to use the technologies that we had to determine base hits and outs and things like that. And then, the pitchers were in the visitors clubhouse, the hitters were on the home dugout or home clubhouse. So we were completely separate locker setups and things like that. So yeah, very different. But I was just happy and fortunate enough to be a part of that group. We got to see a lot of guys develop, and the players really made the most of their time there. You'd think those simulated games would become pretty monotonous after a while, and to a credit to those guys, they did a really good job of keeping the energy to the best of their ability for that, even though you might face the same hitter twice in an inning and 6 times in a 4-inning outing.
Right.
It's a little harder to get those guys out, when you see them 6 times in an hour and they're talking about AAA big league bats. Like it was different, but it was a really good learning experience. We had, I think, 3 guys make their debut on the mound this year. That a part of that was, through some development that they did down at the alternate site. And I was just fortunate, like I said, to be a part of that. And it was great to be back on the field.
So that was everyone at the alternate site. Did they have a chance to play in the big leagues? Was like, you're not getting invited unless you got the chance to get up there?
Everyone was different in terms of, I'm sure every organization. For us, we had like a select group that was purely there for development, like the higher end of the young class of guys that we have coming up in the system that are just there to get innings and just there to develop. They were never going to get the call.
Like
And then there was other
league or something?
Exactly, because we didn't even know if we were going to be able to have an instructional league or a fall league. So we were trying to do what we could with the guys that we had.
Right.
And so if you look at what the Orioles did with their numbers, they didn't go straight to 60 right away. They started at like 45 or whatever the number was at the alternate or total in their player pool, and then added once they knew they didn't need to have more backup at the big league level, because if you took somebody out of the player pool, you had to make them a free agent.
Oh.
And so if you put one of your prospects in to the player pool and then pull them out so you can have someone who's going to come up and help play in the big leagues, you're going to lose that prospect because someone's going to pluck them.
I see. Okay. Gotcha. Okay, well, we'll get back to that in a little bit. I want to go back to your career first before we get into your coaching career. So you went to high school right outside of Sacramento, and I want to just, kind of ask, what kind of pitcher were you back in the day? Like, from your early years, even up to your high school years, were you always a pitcher? Like, did you know, like, that's where you were going to be? Or, what kind of player were you back then?
Marginal. I played infield and pitched growing up. The shortstop, pitcher, catcher thing that pretty much anybody probably played college baseball and was right-handed did. Otherwise, you were a pitcher, first base, outfield because you were left-handed.
Right.
So as the field got bigger, I went from shortstop to second or third because I had some arm strength, but not the range. And then by the time I got to high school, I was basically a third baseman pitcher for freshman and sophomore. And then once I transferred we moved from Sacramento area out to Laguna Creek. And once we made that move to the bigger school, it was PO
pitcher
all
only.
The way through.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And then to describe myself as a pitcher, it would be a short, fat righty with a curveball.
Hey, you can get away with it for a while.
It worked, especially in high school. I could spin a breaking ball and nobody could hit him back then.
Right,
and really,
exactly.
If you can spin a breaking ball, you can stick to that for a while.
Right. But as far as so you, after your high school career, you decided to go the junior college route, and you decided to go play ball at Sac City. Did you know, like, was that a for sure dead set you're going there, or did you actually think about going other places?
I knew that's where I wanted to go. When I was growing up, that was like the powerhouse JUCO in Northern California, and even all of California and nationally. They've got, I want to say it's like 45 big leaguers that have come through that program.
That's a lot.
Which is insane for a junior college, especially a California one that doesn't have scholarships the way the big dogs out and Chipola's and the San Jacks and those guys do. That's just a different beast. But when you talk about the Sacramento area, that's where I wanted to go. But at when my high school career was finishing up, there really wasn't a lot of interest on their end. Luckily, I played Legion ball for two of the Sac City assistant coaches, and that's when it was one of those like, hey, you need to come play for us. We love the way you do things. Let's do this. And so as soon as they said that, it was like, sold.
Okay. So you got 2 years there, right?
I redshirted actually because again, slow fat righty. So I showed up throwing 75 to 78, and I left throwing 86, 89. So development, got in shape, got stronger, cleaned up some delivery stuff. So I went from a soft tossing righty with a curveball to an actual college pitcher that had a chance.
Yeah, and I mean, good enough to get recruited by Oral Roberts. So, how did you pick? I mean, that's not close to Sacramento, obviously. So, how did you pick going there over other places? And you were actually starting to become a real, college pitcher.
It was interesting. There was calls from all the way on the East Coast, from smaller D1s into the South to some bigger D1s that maybe just they weren't offering the money, and it was one of those. As soon as I talked to the pitching coach, Rob Walton at ORU. I talked to him for the first time, and I knew this is where I needed to go. It wasn't the biggest school. It wasn't the biggest scholarship, but it was the best fit. And at the end of the day, that's 100% what mattered to me. And I'm truly blessed to have made that decision because I learned more in those 2 years that I was there that I could apply, and not to take away from Sac City. I learned a ton from there as well, but just a different way of going at things. And I learned a couple new pitches and developed a couple, like I threw for multiple arm slots, things I developed in my time there.
And then as far as the experience, because, obviously I don't know much about Oral Roberts. What was it like going to school there? Just, the whole, campus life and all that stuff.
Different. So it's a private Christian school.
Right.
And so you had to live on campus. We had curfew. We had to wear ties.
Wow.
It was very different in that regard. Far cry from junior college in Sacramento, California.
Right.
But the baseball aspect was fantastic. We all the baseball players lived between two different floors in the same dorm building. And so, we had some good times. And there was a couple instances with the regular students that they didn't understand our schedule with weights at 5 a.m. So they'd be up at like 2 a.m, like making noises. And so we would go around knocking on their doors really loud when we got up for weights. And then we made sure we did it again when we came back. So we ended up figuring it out and having a good time actually with everybody. So it was an outstanding experience.
Yeah. And you were an older guy, technically college-wise, by the time you got there. So
right.
Yeah. Did you know, I looked up, I think you're 4th over all-time in saves there. Is that right?
Really?
Yeah.
Could be. It was a good couple years.
Man, you pitched well.
It was a fun experience. Went in there with, really not a lot of expectations, not really knowing what to do. They didn't really know much about me in terms of the pitching coach did, but the head coach at the time didn't. But by the time the season was over, I was closing for him about halfway through, and that kind of stuck through into my senior year, and that was that.
There you go. So after your college career, you don't play any minor league ball, but you go play for the Long Beach Armada, which is an independent ball team out here in the Golden Baseball League. It no longer exists, but you play with our mutual friend Randall and some others. What went into the decision for you to come actually down to Long Beach all the way from ORU and not in Northern California and play in this league over here?
Well, they were just getting started. I listened to you and Randall talk, and I didn't realize he might have been in the same tryout I was at. I don't actually know when or where he tried out, which is interesting. But I finished up my last final at ORU, got in the car, drove back from Tulsa, Oklahoma, to get to Fullerton for the league-wide tryout.
Right.
It was a 2-day deal. I did, through my bullpen day 1, pitched in the game day 2, and at the end of day 2, they had like this open draft, and I was drafted by the Tijuana Toros. Which that team literally never made it to. I don't think it made it 2 months before supposedly the government took over the field and said, "You're not taking money from us to send it." They wanted no part of it. So That was at least that was the story they told. And so then they had a supplemental draft for the players that were signed by the Toros, and Long Beach took me with the idea of me closing. And at the time, I thought the best opportunity for me to get to affiliated baseball was to put up numbers as a starter. I was built to close and relieve, and I probably should have stuck with that, but that was what I wanted. And so I, got ready for that. And, when they called, they offered, I'd have been traded up to Chico, but I actually always wanted to play at Long Beach State. But again, they didn't need a little short, fat ratty who threw 86. You guys, how they were going back then, 03, 04, they had some dudes. So they did okay without me.
Right.
But the opportunity to play in Long Beach, it was a no-brainer. I was really excited about that.
Okay. And you got to play against guys like Ricky Henderson and play with a guy like Jose Canseco. So what was that experience like, playing against Ricky and also being on the same team as Jose?
Growing up an A's fan, it was it was different, man. I felt like I was 8 years old every time something happened with those guys. I actually made my professional debut, if you want to call it that, in anybody, versus Ricky. Got ahead 0-2 and couldn't put him away because he's still at 50 years old, had the best eye in the league, and wouldn't chase a slider, and I ended up walking him. He never stole base on me, though. I made sure to not let that happen.
There you go.
But that was cool. And then Canseco, that was just a whole nother animal. That was awesome. I remember, when we signed him and he was taking BP for the first time, just, shagging for him, and the ball's carrying a little different. I think I'm going to catch it here, and all of a sudden it's back here. I'm like, oh, wow, that's what guys do to baseballs that can impact it that way.
Right.
But it was very cool. The first time he hit a home run, we all went to give him a high five, and he's bashing us. And again, 8 years old, right away, like Bash Brothers. Oh my God. Like I just gave a bash to a Bash brother. That's amazing.
No, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And I mean, there was definitely some talent in that league, but as far as, when did you start thinking about coaching? Because I know we talked pre-show that you were coaching at Sac City and playing at the same time, and splitting up those seasons. So when did you really start to think about being a coach?
Well, I knew baseball was definitely what I wanted to do. I got a degree in business so that I can coach baseball. I got my master's so I could coach baseball. Like those kinds of things. Like I never really could picture my life without it, and I knew I was going to be limited ability-wise in terms of how far it was going to take me on the field as a player. But if I could, I was always kind of a student of the game. Again, very lucky, Sac City, Oral Roberts, to learn a ton about the game itself, how it's played. Different ways of going about it, both at the lower level and the higher levels between JUCO and Division I. And then, playing a little bit of indie ball, it was one of those like, this is awesome. And, you get some of those experiences with guys where you get to kind of develop, and all of a sudden you're like, wow, this is what it's about. Watching guys grow in front of your eyes and being a part of it, it's special.
Yeah. And before we get to you becoming a coach, I wanted to bring up one story you did tell me when we talked earlier about the one time you got attacked. You had that crazy accident happen. I'll let you tell it, but what exactly happened there? And then how did Randall, his family, come into the picture in this whole thing?
All right. So first of all, Randall Shelley is an amazing human being. He is one of like the greatest people on earth. He was a part of when I got into coaching at Long Beach, and I know we'll touch on
Sure.
the coaching career later, but big part of me settling in down there was my weekly visits with him and Amanda and the kids as they grew, and just all of that. So Randall and his whole family all the way through are just amazing people. The story itself, I was telling you I wanted to be a starter, and so I was getting built up before going to the Armada, and I was on a date with a lady. We went to see a movie, and it was a later movie. I was walking her back to her car, kind of talking about if we wanted to go grab a bite or what was going on, and a car pulls up. Guy gets out with a gun, says, "Give me your wallet." I was kind of shook. I didn't really know what to do with that, and so I just kind of looked at him funny, and he said, "Give me your wallet." And so she jumps in the car. I jump in the car, try to pull the door closed. He gets there, opens it up, starts punching me. I wasn't really thinking. I jump out. I pin him against the car. I'm trying to get the gun out of his hand, and his buddy gets out of the car, and he throws a bottle at us. I didn't know what it was. I just heard the explosion, so I thought a gun went off. And I was like, oh, my God, this is real. What am I doing? So I stop. I hand him my wallet. I'm like, I'm sorry. And I turn, and the guy's walking towards me. I look at him. He swings, and he punches me in the side of the head. So I get stabbed right here with a knife. Knife goes in, down, out. They take off. I look at the girl. I'm just like, help. And she just screamed. She said I look like a horror movie with blood just pumping out with my heartbeat.
Man.
So put my hand on my head, walk over to the movie theater. See a security guard. I'm like, help. He's like, I'm on the phone with 911. I'm like, cool. Keep walking, get to the box office. They throw me a shirt. I put the shirt on my head, and I'm like laying down, kind of holding myself, but I feel like the hemorrhaging closing off my airway. So I have to like lay down and really like open it up. And the cops get there to clear the scene. And I'm like, he asked me, so what happened? I said, well, I got robbed and I got stabbed in the head. He's like, oh, let me see. So he moves the shirt, and I just feel this gush of warmth go down my body. And he's like, oh, you weren't kidding? I was like, nope, I was not, sir. That's it's not a joking matter. And so, they ended up putting me in the ambulance, driving me to the hospital. I was in the ER, obviously, to get things prepped, and then I was in the OR. My parents saw me in between ER and OR, said if they didn't know it was me, they wouldn't recognize me. I was covered head to toe in blood or something. And then I woke up like a day later in recovery. I couldn't talk. I had a trach. You can see, maybe you can't, but a trach there. And there's a scar where you can't see it at all. They did a great job, but runs down my neck where they open it up. The guy actually cut my external carotid artery, so they'd tie that off. And so there's actually a nerve ending right here that got stretched out a little bit. So I don't actually sweat on this side of my head. It is bone dry and white. This will be wet, red and sweaty if I'm working out. I don't have full function of this eye, like in terms of it's always a little more closed than the other. and then I don't have full function of the side of my mouth. Like I just can't get that thing to go anywhere. But other than that, that was kind of the extent of my long-term issues. But getting back to Randall and his family, his dad was actually kind of our team chiropractor. But when I told him, or Randall, I think, told him the story what was going on, and I couldn't talk. My mouth wouldn't move. I kind of talked like Napoleon, or Kip from Napoleon Dynamite for a long time because I just couldn't really do anything with this. He did some work in there to really open it back up and loosen some things out. So if it wasn't for his dad and what he did, I don't know what I'd look like or talk like right now.
Wow.
So very fortunate to have run into them at that time in my life.
You know what? First of all, I'm glad. Thank you for sharing that story. I know it's not a fun one, but I appreciate it. That's an amazing. I mean, what a recovery, and thank God, you're okay, and it didn't, come back any worse. But you look great to me. I don't see any issues really. If you're just, really not looking too hard, like it's totally fine.
Thanks. All my pictures, I make sure to like stretch my eye out too. So I'm like, all right, hold on, give me 1 second. All right, hey, you got 3 seconds. Let's go. Like, jeez, quick.
Man. Okay, well, let's get to a lighter-hearted story at least. No, I really appreciate that. I think it was worth telling, and the connection between everybody. It's just so I'm glad everything's good there.
Yeah.
You went to go play winter ball in Columbia, and I kind of want you to explain. It's a different world down there. So how did that whole story of you getting to Columbia and figuring out what team you're going to be playing for?
That was another fun one. So this was through my. I don't want to say it was after my second year in the Golden League. I ended up playing 3 seasons there. So one after Randall left, which I think was probably what finished it for me. I couldn't live without him.
Right.
No, it was after that year. I got a call from just a random international agent who was looking for American players that were in independent ball because they had just started bringing major league affiliated players back down to Columbia. But I think it was the Marlins and the Cubs that were the only ones that had players down, or maybe the Cardinals. I don't remember exactly. But there wasn't a lot of affiliated ball players down there, so they needed some fillers from the Americans. So signed my contract. They booked me on a flight from Sacramento to Miami, where I've got to I have to get a updated passport and get a work visa, get all that done in a day, and then fly down the next day to Columbia. And while I was getting dropped off at the airport, I happened to be dropped off right next to one of the umpires. And the guy that was taking me from the hotel to the airport introduced us. And so he happened to be on my flight. Thank goodness. Because when I get down to Columbia, there's nobody with the sign. There's nobody with anything. And I barely know enough Spanish at this point to order a chicken sandwich. So it was not a good situation for me. And luckily, the umpire saw me looking like a lost puppy and was like, "Hey, man, do you know where you're going?" And I was like, "No, and there's nobody here." He's like, "Come with me. We'll go to the hotel." So luckily, he was there. I grabbed my 2 bags. I mean, there's the guards, have machine guns for the hotel. I mean, not the hotel, the airport security. And I'm like, this is just nuts. And we get in the cab and we're going down a 2-lane road with 4 lanes of traffic and motorcycles weaving in and out. And like, this is different. This is definitely different. I mean, I had done some traveling, but not to Columbia at all. And so get to the hotel and they're like, we don't have you on a team. We don't know who you are. I'm like, I literally have a contract. Like, what are we talking about? Mind you, I don't have a cell phone because I left that back in America. It wasn't like international phone calls were real cheap back then. I was just going to buy a throwaway phone and get a calling card. But at that point, I had nothing. So, yeah, they figured something out and came knocking on my door at like 3 a.m. and like, hey, your van leaves at 5. You got to get out of here. We got a team for you. So I go on this 4-hour van ride with 12 people in an 8-passenger van. And, there's this 100-year-old woman sitting in the front seat. And we're like, well, of course she gets the front seat. The downside is she has to hold the ice cooler. I'm like, what is going on? So get out there, show up to their second practice, I think. And we opened up the next night and he's like, hey, so what do you do? I'm like, starting pitcher. He's like, all right, you're starting game 2. And I was like, all right, let's go.
Cool.
So it all worked out in the end, but it was a crazy start to my international baseball experience.
Okay, so you come back from winter ball, and then you end up once you start really coaching. So how did the transition go from you being done playing, independent ball and then becoming a full-time pitching coach at Sac City?
So I was very fortunate in that both Sac City and the Golden League schedule worked out really well, where I didn't have to really miss any time. So I was able to do that for those first 3 years. But my last year of indie ball was one of those. I knew I'd had my tryouts. I was getting to that point where I was too old to probably have a chance, unless I was all of a sudden throwing 100, which wasn't going to happen. And so it was just time to move on. And I was in a good place at Sac City. I was getting mentored as a pitching coach, and the guy who was my pitching coach, who's still there now, was a part of that process. And then the head coach was a guy named Andy McKay, who's now the director of player development for the Mariners.
Yeah.
And so some big time guys helping in that process. And so when the time came, it was an easy decision. Like, hey, this is what I want to do. Let's make this move.
So when I went to Long Beach State, I had a roommate there named David Bourne, who you got to coach. We had a lot of guys come from Northern California down to Long Beach, especially when I was there, but we had a huge NorCal influence, and he was one of them. And you got to coach him, and I just wanted to kind of hear your experience coaching him and others of, you at the junior college level, you don't get that much time with certain guys, but you got to really see him and others develop. So what do you remember about him and the other players you got to coach at Sac City?
Well, David it's funny. Borney is actually my first project, if you will, as a coach. I came back from that tryout, and it was my first week on the job, and it was in January, so we were right into that spring semester of things. And the pitching coach at Bomber, who, like I said, still there now, is like, hey, this guy's got a real arm, but he doesn't have a breaking ball. Your job is to teach him a curveball of some kind that works, whatever. Because that's what I could, like I said, short, fat, righty with the curve, I could always spin it.
Right.
And so we tried a few different things, and it just wasn't working. This wasn't working, that wasn't working. But like, he kept working, he kept trying, and he trusted the process. And we found a grip that worked, and all of a sudden he had this banger curveball. I mean, you saw it.
Yeah.
Left-handed through low 90s and had a hammer that plays. And so we got to, have the opportunity to play, at his dream school. And when he told me that, it was one of those like, that's awesome. This is what I want to do. This is what it's all about. Like, watching guys, fulfill their dreams because of, not that I never threw a pitch for this kid, but like, just to be a small part of his development and watch him grow into, ultimately playing professional baseball out of his dream school was awesome.
Yeah, no, definitely. So after you were at Sac City for a while, you got the chance to come down to Long Beach State. What was that transition like, going from a junior college? Now you're, not the main pitching coach, but you're actually becoming a coach and working your way up to D1, and back at Long Beach State, of course, where you played your independent ball.
Right. So no, that was an awesome experience. That was one of those where I was actually coaching summer ball in the Northwoods with Andy McKay. I spent 2 summers out there with him, and that second summer, it was like, all right, I want to try to get out to another school. Like, nothing against being here, but it's time. And so all the process, like the interview process, was all phone based. So I actually talked to Buck a couple different times, and basically lined up where the week I got back from the Northwoods, he was visiting family up north. And so I actually drove out to the Bay Area, and we sat at Starbucks for about an hour and a half, just doing kind of an unofficial interview. And it was after that he, called me probably a week later and just said, hey, I don't know, there's 2 positions that were open. I wanted the volunteer job because that was on field, and there was an ops position. He's like, I don't know what you're gonna, like, which job I want to offer you, but I want you as a part of this. And I just said, let's go. Like, if either one, at least it's foot in the door when the volunteer job opens up, the understanding is that I'll be the next one. And that's what happened. I was ops for a year, and then I was volunteer there for 3.
Right. And overall, now that you made the jump, those, 4+ years, what was your total experience like now that you made the jump to Division I baseball? Did you feel like you got to have an imprint on, the players that came through and also see those guys just like you did in junior college?
Yeah, obviously Buck being the head guy really had the biggest impact on the players, but I was able to learn a ton about, especially organizationally, like how to set up a full season throwing program, how to set up a build up for the guys in January, getting ready for that opening day. How to structure bullpens a certain way. Just all that kind of stuff was huge in my learning process, and I've definitely developed from that. Impact on players, I'd like to think I had some, but obviously, you're still the secondary guy, and I was also coaching first and doing other things, and so again, learned a ton of what I wanted to do as a coach, and there's things I learned that I didn't want to do as a coach, and I think that's what you take from everywhere you go.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, you got to find out what works and what doesn't, and then you get to, a nice job offer to go to Nova Southeastern, which is in Florida. So, and that's a Division II school. But what made you want to go from West Coast back out? Another long journey for you out to South Florida.
Well, I mean, obviously, as you can tell, I'm not afraid to travel.
Right.
I've uprooted a few different times, just kind of, a lot of times sight unseen. I never had a visit to ORU. I never, obviously I played at Blair Field, so I knew what that was like. But I'd never even set foot on. I was actually recruiting for Long Beach when I got the call for the interview for Nova, and so we had mutual friends that got the head coach at the time, a guy named Greg Brown, who's now the hitting coordinator for the Rays. He was part of the Team USA, Stars and Stripes, and some coaching staff for developmental things. And Bomber, who's the pitching coach at Sac City, and Rob Cooper is the head coach at Penn State. Coop was the head guy on that 18U team, and Bomber and Brownie were actually roommates. And so Brownie knew he was going to need a pitching coach, and Bomber's like, I got your guy. Here you go. Like, you need to call this kid. And it ended up being a little bit – Brownie had some other things going on, obviously Team USA and some things like that. So it took him about a month to actually reach out to me. And at that point, I was similar to my experience at Sac City. It was time for me to do something else. Like, I was ready at this point to have my own staff, not to be the assistant pitching coach, if you will. And so very similar to my recruiting experience at ORU, in that after one phone call with Brownie, I knew this was where I wanted to go. It wasn't going to be the biggest school that I could work for, and wasn't going to be the most money I could make as an assistant coach, but it was going to be the best fit. And again, never regretted that decision in my life. We're very fortunate in our time there. We won a conference championship my first year. We won the national championship my second year. I met my future wife while we were working there. So it's and obviously, it's led me to where I'm at today as a minor league coach.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, D2 championship, that's nothing to, sneeze at. That's a big deal. So, and you had some guys go through there and get drafted. One of not while you were there, but JD Martinez went there. There've been some big leaguers that have gone through there. So, at least what can you say about the kind of the culture that was built, and kind of obviously you recruited well because you guys won a lot.
This is not going to be any knock on Long Beach or anything else in the Big West, because obviously been through that grind, nothing but respect for that. But South Florida D2 baseball is right there, and if not better, with the talent that comes through. Because you got to think about the kickbacks we're getting are from Miami, Florida State, Florida, even Gulf Coast and UCF. I mean, it's again nothing against the Big West.
Oh yeah,
it's just we had more guys throwing 90s my first year at Nova than we did my last year at Long Beach. It's just that was the talent that was out there that was playing, and it's impressive. And so we we were very fortunate in that we had a lot of good players. But you talk about the culture. That's Brownie had a huge part in that, and that's one of the bigger things that I learned was, developing men wins a lot more baseball games than developing pitches or players and things like that. Like, men win baseball games. You can get a lot from character. That means so much more. And honestly, that's kind of how I try to coach guys. I want to get to know them, and I want to be able to help them in a way that they're going to understand, and that we can grow together, and they know that we're supportive, not just like, hey, go do this because I said so. Like, that doesn't work. And it hasn't worked for a long time. That's not how society's going. And that's, having those conversations and developing that ability to work because you want to, not because somebody tells you to. Coaching by motivation, not by like scare tactics.
Right. And, even after all the success you had, you got a big, not, I guess, I don't know if it's your big break, but you got a huge opportunity to go coach in the Baltimore Orioles organization, and you were able to coach low A there. And you ended up being last year, you were the South Atlantic League Coach of the Year. So obviously you're doing something right. So what was it like, I guess before we get to that part, just from the transition from D2 baseball to now I'm in the minor leagues coaching?
Well, I was fortunate to coach a summer in the Cape as well. So it's interesting. I didn't realize, how good the Cape was until that next draft where we had 13 players taken in the first 10 rounds and we weren't even that good. It's like, geez, we finished 4th out of 5 on our side. So we barely made the playoffs. And that just tells you the talent that's up there. And so having worked with that caliber of player before, that helped me with what was going on in that transition. And then coaching low A is literally coaching college kids in terms of age range. You have,
Right.
The high schoolers that are in their first full season, if they're the top end of it, or you have some older guys that are like the lower end of it. And so basically it's coaching college kids. And so it was a lot easier in that aspect that, I already knew what it took to handle those idiots, if you will. There are idiots though.
Yeah. Well, they're idiots with money now, and they got.
There's definitely a couple of those too. I made a mound visit last year with a first rounder from 2 years ago, a kid named Grayson Rodriguez, who signed for a little over $4 million, and our first rounder from this past year, which was Adley Rutschman, who signed for over $8 million. And I just went out there, I looked at him like, $12.5 million, guys. You figure it out. What am I going to say? Like, just go.
Right. It's a little bit different than college where there's so much behind the scenes going on and there's money behind dudes and there's different, everybody's on a different schedule of development or where their careers are on every team. So I know what you mean. You got to manage, you got to, I guess, pick your spots with certain guys.
Well, and honestly, those two are fantastic kids, like very fortunate in that they were just tremendous, like hats off to the scouting department to find those guys. The personalities are amazing. You would have no idea that either one of them were first rounders if they didn't look like it and play like it.
Right.
Because they don't act like it in terms of what a first round bonus baby would be.
Right.
And, you talk about that transition from college, like we had 13 or 14 pitchers on our staff. If there was a guy who was on the TI list that were working with 14 pitchers is nothing when you used to having a college. D2, there's no limit to roster sizes. So we'd have 40, 42 guys on our team. So you're talking about 20, 22 pitchers every year. Like I can handle developing 14 professional athletes as opposed to 20 to 22, like you said, just a huge range of like D1 kickback, JUCO transfer, high school players, a freshman in college.
Right.
Like you're talking about totally different skill sets. And that was one of the things that I was fortunate enough in my time as a player and a coach was to learn how to communicate with different players in different ways and get the same message across. If we have to say it 16 different ways to 16 different guys. So when you're dealing with 14 guys with true aptitude and ability, it's like, oh, this is cake. Like, no problem. I'll work with anybody at this point,
Right. And there's no more school distractions. It's all baseball all the time.
It is baseball, yes. There's, especially as a coach, I didn't have to recruit. I didn't have to be making phone calls every night. I didn't have to go into the office early in the morning. I wasn't the strength conditioning coach. I wasn't like I said, I wasn't the scout. I wasn't recruiting any of that. I could just purely focus on player development, and that's what it was all about.
Right, which is awesome. And you did so well that you got promoted. You got to skip high A and go right to double A. And of course, and then COVID happens. But what was it like as far as your transition from low A, baseball to now we're at a different caliber of prospect up in double A?
Well, it's funny. So regular spring training, they bring the double A and triple A staffs up. So I was actually in big league camp for the first part of spring training and literally went down for a week of minor league spring training. Then COVID hit. So it was a mix of some guys that I would have and that were above me. But, being on the big league side of things and talking to those guys and watching them work, you're just going, there's obviously differences because they're big leaguers for a reason.
Right.
But it's not so different that I can't handle it. I would have loved to have seen the game prep and things like that at the double A level compared to, hey man, we're in low A. Let's just go throw our stuff to the best of our ability as opposed to, hey, let's go game plan for 3, 4, and 5 right now because we have to start understanding how we're going to use our weapons and how to use all the information we have to get these guys out when it matters.
Right. And I ask a lot of the former players that I have on that, what's the toughest jump in levels. And for me, it was going from high A to double A. I just felt it as a pitcher. It was tougher. Like the hitters are better, and even up to triple A, and the guys have an approach now, and they're more selective. So yeah, I can imagine, game planning, you have to when you get to that level.
Yeah, no, it was definitely something I was looking forward to. And, obviously, good Lord willing, we have a 2021. We can get back to regular baseball, and I'll get to go do those things. And so the alternate site was kind of a little bit of that. We tried to implement some like, hey, let's pick a guy on the other side. You're going to face him 5 times. How are we going to attack him today? And it was also, like we talked about earlier, you have the prospects that weren't going to go up, and you have the guys that are getting ready to make their debuts, or the guys that are going up and down working on things. Like, you had to apply work differently because obviously the young kids don't know how to apply that advanced attack plan that the the big leaguers or the double A, triple A guys that are ready to make their debut know how to. And you actually have to talk to the catchers the same way too, because we had prospect catchers and we had established catchers, and they have to know how to talk to the other side as well. Like, the prospect catcher can't talk to the big leaguer about game planning the same way you can talk to the A ball prospect.
Right. I had my former pitching coach, John Strauss, who's the pitching coach at Baylor now, and a little bit from Long Beach. Where do you fall on like all the new analytics and spin rate and all that stuff? Are you a fan of it? Do you implement it? Are you kind of on the fence? Or does the organization just make everybody aware of it and use it?
Personally, I love it. I didn't, we had a little bit of it at Nova. We had Flight Scope, which was a lot of the same information presented a little differently, and they were kind of in the growing phases. So we were part of like one of their first schools to start acquiring data that they could use to help set up, where they ultimately wanted to go with that. And so I wasn't able to truly dive into it the way I am now, but I also didn't know any better. I learned a ton last year in terms of how to apply it. It's the future. It's not the future of the game. It's the game. That's where it's where we're at. How you want to use it is up to you. Our job as coaches is to understand the players and how much they can take. Because if I just give you, information from if you try to take a drink out of a fire hose of information, it ain't going to go so well for you. And that's what can happen sometimes, whether it's, information overload and bogs them down, or they start overthinking like, oh, what pitch should I throw here? I got to throw this right now because it says the number. No, man, it's still baseball. You can make a perfect pitch at the perfect time, and the guy can just go ass out double down the line. You're like, what do I do? Nothing. Go do that 100 times, and it's going to get an out 99 times. But guess what? Baseball. Yeah. Like, it just happens. Like, right. In terms of that data, like, I kind of like to describe it in that this was kind of a weird little analogy that hit me one day when I was backing my car up. And can you parallel park?
Yeah.
Okay. Some people can, some people can't. If you can parallel park, you can parallel park no matter what. That's like coaching. If you can coach, you can coach. If you can't, you can't. Having a backup camera in my car doesn't mean I can parallel park. Having data doesn't mean I can coach. But if I have a backup camera in my car, I can parallel park a lot quicker and a lot more efficiently because I know exactly how far I need to go back. I know when I need to start turning. I know if I'm going to hit that curb or that car and I need to readdress, or I just whip it in, no second thoughts. The data does that. The information does that. The technology does that, where I think this is why your curveball is or isn't working based on what I see with my eye. Me being able to tell you that is important. But if I think it's because of this, and then all of a sudden I go look at the edger and it's like, no, it has nothing to do with what this is doing. Our hand is never in the right position to throw that pitch. Well, now I just saved 30 different reps of bad stuff and went right to what works.
Yeah, information is never bad. You just exactly. It's how you interpret it and how much you use it in your, while you're in the game, for sure. Right. So I totally get that. As far as your, professional goal in pitching as a pitching coach, I'm sure it's to obviously be a big league pitching coach one day, but is that your process? Is that now you've gotten out of college, you've gotten to this level now, and you're getting closer. So where do you feel like you are at in your career as a pitching coach?
Still a baby.
Yeah, I would think so too. Yeah.
Whether it's college or pro, I think that's one thing about baseball. It's ever evolving. So as you know as well as anybody, as soon as you say I got it, I figured it out, this game's going to humble you like that.
For sure.
And hey, I found this curveball, it's working great, and oh wow, it just went 500 feet.
Yeah.
So in terms of where I'm headed, like yes, the ultimate goal is to be a big league pitching coach. When I was with Brownie at Nova, he always said he had this goal of winning a national championship, a College World Series, a D2, D1, and a big league and Major League World Series. Well, we took care of the D2 thing. We thought we were going to get a chance at D1. It never really worked out. We've both since left for pro ball. He's a hitting coordinator, so he could be a hitting coach on a team one day, or maybe he makes it to the manager. I don't know if he's going to hire me. I don't know if he, but whatever that process is, like I'm just enjoying the ride. I love the where I'm at right now in the organization. I'm so thankful for the opportunity. I don't know how interested I'd be in going back to college, at least not right now, for all those things we talked about, whether it's the academics, the recruiting, especially. I mean, that is insane. Like at a Division II, we were going a year and a half, 2 years out. I can't imagine what D1s are going through when they're going 4 and 5 years out. You're having eighth graders committing at camps, and you're just going, that kid hasn't set foot on a high school field yet, yet alone like determined that this is the school he wants to go to. This is the major he's going to go and he's going to play. Like, wow.
Yeah.
I want no part of that. Not to mention you got to keep tabs on those guys. It doesn't ever stop because until they sign that letter of intent, there's some shady people out there. They might try to take them.
Oh yeah. 100%. Yeah. No, that's good. You're definitely on your way. So, I saw an old interview of you about, I think maybe your grandparents lived in Hawaii or something like that. It was an old Long Beach State interview, I think, for the website. But
Okay.
It said that they lived out there and you're a golfer. So I wanted to ask you about, obviously, there's good golf in Florida, but what are your favorite courses around the country to play golf at?
Ooh, well, there's in Northern California, my dad had a buddy of his that did this golf getaway up in the Gray Eagle area, and so there's some fun courses up there. Grizzly Ranch, Gray Eagle Meadows is a fun track. I've been fortunate enough to play Doral out here, played the Blue Monster. That was impressive.
Yeah, I bet.
I'm sure you saw in that article, my grandpa worked at the Grand Wailea, so I got to play all three of the courses there. Very, very impressive. Just the views alone make the course worth playing. It's better when you don't have to pay full freight because you got family.
Right.
I'm trying to think. The home course for Nova Southeastern is called Grand Oaks. It actually is where they filmed Caddyshack. So I've played Bushwood, and that might be the most fun just because I got to play Bushwood.
Is that in Fort Lauderdale?
It is. It's right across the street from Nova Southeastern.
Wow.
Yeah. So I'm
cool.
pretty sure, like, I played with the AD a couple times, and he'd show us different things. Like, hey, this is where they shot that, and like, I want to say the condos they were building were like the dorms for the school, or just something random like that. It's like very cool to look at.
Even though you're from California, do you think the courses are better out there in Florida or back here in California? Or is it just golf is golf?
Well, I mean, I'm not good enough to know all of it, but they're definitely different. The grass plays different out here. It's just different. Golf is just fun. I like playing golf.
For sure. Well, you got a long off season ahead of you. So any plans for the off season, before hopefully we get back to regular minor league baseball and you get back to your grind?
Well, we just closed on a house 2 weeks ago. Sight unseen for me as I was up in the alternate site.
You're good at that.
Right. Luckily, the fiance did a phenomenal job. This house is amazing. They left this flower artwork here.
Looks good.
Yeah, sure. It looks like a doctor's office, but it's here. And it's a big wall, so it's going to stay here until we find something better. And maybe it stays for a while. The wife likes it. We'll keep it. Getting actually married in November.
Awesome.
So with COVID, we cut it way down. We're doing a backyard wedding with just the immediate family. Going to have like 10 people here. But that also helped with closing on this house. So we're saving some money one place and spending another. So a lot going on with that. COVID also, helped us get a dog because I was home to train him. So we got 7-month-old puppy running around. He's great, providing plenty of entertainment for us. So that's the time right now. At least we'll head back to California for Christmas. Spend a couple weeks out there, and then get right back out here, ready for the grind. There's going to be weekly check-ins with. I got a call list of about 14 pitchers. We'll start, cranking on their development plans and kind of what their off-season work's going to look like, and getting ready for, like we said, hopefully a regular spring training here in February.
Yeah, definitely. Last question. I know you're a huge A's fan, and I know they're in the playoffs right now, but as far as the A's in general, I know you're obviously with another organization, so I know you can't say too much, but you got to grow up watching when they had Zito and Hudson and Mulder, and they were really good. What do you think it is about the A's that obviously they don't pay their guys, the stars, they let them go. But what's it been like as an A's fan over the last, your whole life, basically?
Glutton for punishment, I'll tell you what. And there's something to that I'm a Vikings fan from my mom growing up in Minnesota. So
I know that goes. Yeah.
That sucks. I grew up a Kings fan and they kept losing to the Lakers. And so that always sucked. It's just, my dad went to Cal, so that's kind of our our college football team. And anytime they're good, they always lose the game. I think they were number one for like an hour one year, and then they lost. Just stuff like that. The A's, they've done a lot of good things. Hopefully, if and when they get this stadium, they'll hold true to their word and actually keep the players. I actually wear 15 because Tim Hudson was my favorite player at that point in time.
Sure.
A 6-foot righty has a chance to make it. There you go. That's my guy.
Right.
And so, it's not always easy, but at least we won the first round this year. Of course, we finally win the division, or they win the division. I can't say we. I actually work for another organization.
Yeah.
They win the division and still have to play. They don't get the wild card off. They have to play, but they took care of business and open up here in an hour and a half or so. And
there you go.
Chime in and watch that.
Well, good. I'll let you get to it. Justin, thank you very much for coming on the show. Great stories. I really appreciate your time today, and we'll definitely be catching up soon.
Absolutely. Anytime. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
My thanks to Justin Ramsey. What a great episode with him. Hope you guys enjoyed all those stories. Some of that stuff was crazy, especially him, getting attacked in Long Beach, and, also just his journey in general. And you can tell he definitely enjoys his job. So it's great to hear from somebody like that who just wants to make people better and see other players succeed. So many thanks to Justin Ramsey. As always, you can find the show at Too Tall Sports Podcast. You can also email the show, tootallsportspodcast@gmail.com. You can find me everywhere. Please subscribe, rate, and review. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Amazon Music now. We're everywhere. So, and please hit me up on social media. Share all the links. Got to get the word out there about the Too Tall Sports Podcast. So I appreciate you guys as always, and we'll see you next week for another great episode. Peace.